Hey guys, welcome back to another tutorial. This is Alex2K. The last tutorial I was discussing ray trace shadows to achieve caustic effects. It's a cheat of them, but it's still. On this one, I'm actually going to achieve the same result with not ray trace shadows, but with mapping textures into lights. Now, I'm gonna save this scene, which was pretty much where I ended the last tutorial. So I'm just gonna go ahead and save scene as. I'm gonna call it teapot ray trace caustics. Okay, so I want to show you an example of what you can achieve with mapping mapping a texture into the actual light source. So I'm going to go ahead and open a little animation I made. Let me just look for it. Alright, so we got this little, our teapot. And you can see there's some, water caustics coming in from the theoretical water that's on top. And let me open this animation here. So, if you're ever trying to like recreate something like this and you're thinking, I'm gonna make a plane and I'm gonna give it some bumps or whatever and do caustics, then my suggestion is, rethink your approach and see if you can. If you definitely need it for a particular reason, then go ahead and use it. But if it's for nothing else than just giving a look, then you might want to try, instead of doing that, just mapping a texture into a light. Now I'm going to start this exercise. I'm actually going to keep this one for a little bit later because it might get a little bit more complicated. And I'm just going to delete that light and delete that thingy, that wall there. And just going to make another render here. So we got our little light source and we got our shadows, which are ray trace shadows. And that's pretty much what we have right now. Now actually, let's suppose that that's going to be the light source. But the caustics, although they should be coming from there, we're just going to make this, actually, let's just make this higher. Because, if that's the caustics, it will be coming in from higher for you to actually see them. So there we go. So we got a more 90-degree angle. It's going to be more explanatory that way. Now on this light, make your cone size so that you have it small, so that you can understand what's going to happen here, because I need you to understand how the texture itself applies. Now this is spotlight, and each light has different mapping, and the best way that you'll be able to understand how it maps is to test it out. But in this case, with the spotlight, you'll see the cone here, and pretty much the way that it maps is based on that cone angle. So if you had a texture, then we can say that, use my cool little looking pen here. You can say that a texture would be mapped like this, based on those dimensions, like so, more or less, to give you an idea. So this would be the limit, limit, the limit, and the limit of the texture. So it's placing it in that cone. If you make your cone bigger, then of course the placement is going to change. But keep that in mind. And if you have a penumbra, then it's going to be based on the penumbra angle. So like if it's like this, then you need to look for the angle of the penumbra, and you can do that by looking through your camera. You'll see that outer circle, that would be the placement area of the texture. Alright, so in this case, the texture will be placed on I don't know what I clicked. Hey, sorry. Okay, let's do this one more time. The texture will be placed based on those edges over there. Alright? So keep that in mind. That's how it places the texture. In this case, in the case of a spotlight. But as I said, each light has different type of placement, and the best way for you to figure that out is to experiment and figure it out. Alright? I've already done my homework, but I suggest you do yours. Alright, so we got this, and since I did that example, I showed you that example, we can start by working with that example. I'm just going to switch this over to camera shape 1, camera 1, there we go. And if you have your light source, you can look for it under lights. Just select it and show the input and output connections of it. And if you double click it and open the attribute for it, you'll find two values, color and intensity. It depends on how you want to map it, because maybe you want the color to be red and you only want to map the intensity values. So it doesn't really matter what you map this to, it just depends on the effect that you want. If you want to map, let's suppose water, you can actually map the water to just the intensity values and then make your color whatever color you want. Or if you want to make the color a checker, then you can do that. So it sort of like depends on the approach. Now in this case, I'm just going to map it to the intensity because it's less obvious than mapping it to the color. So intensity values are based from 0, which means no intensity, 1, which has a 1 amount of intensity, and 10, which would be 10 amounts of intensity, so on and so forth. Right? So that would be like pretty intense, and that would be not so intense. And if I had decay, then I would have to increase the intensity to a retarded amount so that I can get some light on my scene. And even there, I would still need more. So you get the point. So the intensity is just the value, but you gotta understand and see what is the value that you need. In this case, I don't know, it's 1500. But for now, just to keep things simple, keep your decay without any decay. That would mean that an intensity of 1 would have a pretty good amount of intensity. Okay? Alright, so let's go ahead and map a ocean on there. Now, when you do that, it's going to ask you what you want to map where. And this is the reason why I wanted to show you the connection via the intensity. Because if I had done it to the color, it would have been pretty straightforward. It would just be like map it. Just drag and drop pretty much. See, that would work. That's why I just did it this way. Because that makes you think. So what am I going to connect where? Well, we know that we need to connect to the intensity, which is right here. But what are we going to connect to the intensity? Well, if you look at the texture, and you can double click here just to look at the values. Every texture has this thing called color balance. Color balance has those values: default color, color gain, color offset, alpha gain, alpha offset, and alpha is luminance. So if you check that alpha is luminance value, that means that whatever luminance value is shown here, it would be transferred as an alpha. And what's good about this is that if you look at the intensity value of the connection editor here, you see that it doesn't really have 3 values. It's just 1. You look at color, color has 3 inputs. You look at I don't know, shadow color, it also has 3 inputs. But intensity only has 1. So the question would be, well, what am I going to map into that intensity? You can map the out alpha of the texture to the intensity. And because we checked on, you can hit close, and because we checked on alpha is luminance, then now the intensity value is read as that alpha, which means that whatever luminance value we get here is going to be the intensity. As long as your colors are white, you'll have an intensity of 1, and the colors are black, you'll have an intensity of 0. I hope that makes sense. So here on this ocean, we can achieve a little bit more intensity values by increasing the wave height. You can play with these values until you get the look that you want. and keep it all high or all low. You can change the scale. I'm gonna make it, let's see, 5. You can change the number of frequencies, so you can have more or less. You can change the wavelength to the minimum and maximum. And I'm just gonna change that up and come over here, and you can again change the wavelength, so you can have like different types of looks here. So you know, it's a matter of playing with it. So let me go ahead and play with it a little bit. I'm going to change the wave peaking so that they really peak, and I'm going to keep this guy default like that, or vice versa. And the scale, there we go, and number of frequencies, let's see, a little bit more, and the wavelength. Okay, so let's not get too into it, because then we're gonna just spend a whole bunch of time playing with this. All right. So once you get something that you want, at this point, actually, if I just make a render, then it's already working. You can see it right there. And if you animate the values, and in the case of an ocean or a water texture, you got this thing called time. So if you change that time, it's going to change over time. So I'm actually going to write a script here that you can use. If you right click on the word time, you can create new expression, and that's going to open up the expression editor, and you just copy this value and you just paste it. And since it's time, you want it to be equals, guess what, time. So that means that it changes over time. Let me just add a colon there, edit, close. So now what's going to happen is that as you play through, you look at the hypershade, I'm sorry, you'll see that the value is changing over time. Right now, that value is 1 second in, is going to be 1, 2 seconds in, is going to be 2, 3 seconds in, is going to be 3, and so on and so forth. You can also make it be anything else, but again, if you go ahead and do a little bit of research, you can understand those scripts a little bit better and make something cool. So in this case, I'm not going to render this because I already showed you a render of what you can do, but I'll just open it. I'm going to change the color first, so that it makes a little bit more sense. And give it a little bit of a bluish tone like that. And there you go. And voila, so that's the texture being placed on that space that we talked about. It's got its color. And if you look at the animation, which will open up again, then you can get something like this. This one has actually some extra controllers that are making minuscule adjustments. Like if you look at the shadow, you'll see that when it's intensified, the shadow gets a little bit sharper, and where it is softer, then the shadow gets a little bit softer, which is just the same thing as I just did. It's just the scripts and stuff like that to connect those values. But anyway, that is a basic understanding of mapping mapping textures into lights. All right. So I'm gonna pause this tutorial, or I'm gonna stop this tutorial there, and I'm gonna go back and open up the scene, and I'll show you what the connections would be in the case of a mural. All right. I'm sorry, not a mural. What do you call that? Tinted glass. The approach is the same, but that one will have a little bit more tweaking and a little bit more of a discussion into the textures themselves. All right. So I'll see you later. Bye bye.